Hello, this is Alan Folmsbee, and this is Future Science. First episode, November 3rd, 2019. So I'm going to be talking about time, and this is something that got me started in a whole avalanche of ideas. And it's started with gravity volume theory, and then I moved into electromagnetic theory. So you can see my background here, and Maui here is still green. It's about 10 in the morning here on the 3rd. That means it's 10 hours more advanced in London. So anyway, Greenwich Mean Time is about 20 hours, and I'll try to hit this every day, around 2,000 hours. Greenwich Mean Time, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So that's 10 a.m. here, and it'll be 8 p.m. in London. So now the gravity volume theory started out with the considering time. At first I thought maybe time does not exist. So I proposed that on some chat rooms, and a physicist convinced me that time does exist. So based on that, he said that time is growing. So since there's a space-time continuum and time is growing, you might think that space is shrinking. And that sounds like gravity to me, as if gravity is really just space is like a liquid that's shrinking into every proton and neutron. So I followed up on this theory, and it turned out to be very fruitful. Let me show you a couple of overviews of the entire series first. I'm going to go into a lot of detail on this idea over these live YouTube streaming opportunities every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2000 Greenwich Mean Time. So that I'm going to show you some text now. I'm going to turn the camera around. Pardon how abrupt this looks. Okay, I've turned the camera around. Let's try and take a look at how it's centered here. Yeah, you can see it there. Gravity volume theory. I'll just make a little more wide angle, I guess. So that I started out, like I was saying, figuring time does exist. And after a few calculations, I figured out that time grows by 5 nanoseconds every time space shrinks by the volume of a proton. And this turned out to be a new universal ratio, which I'll be going into in a great deal. Now, in this overview, right now, for this morning, I'm just going to be talking about 20 subjects for 20 minutes. And as time grows out of a proton and space shrinks in that ratio, that's the conservation of continuum. So the four-dimensional continuum is conserved for gravity. Time is defined by gravity, as you can easily measure by dropping a rock for 1 second on the surface of the Earth and making some calculations. And also I'm redefining potential energy. It's a calculated energy. Now, another radical thing I'll be bringing up in the future science is that the photon has no energy. So you might wonder, well, if it has no energy, then what was everyone else talking about? And photon really just has a velocity-like ratio of something, and the energy is only in the atom that emitted the photon, got changed, or the atom that absorbs the photon will have its energy changed in an interplay between the nucleus and its momentum of free space and the photon and its velocity. So when you multiply velocity by momentum, you get energy change in the atom. Now, also, I've gone on to something more advanced called the mass equals area theory. So that the kilogram is about 1.2 square meters of continuum. This is the area of protons and neutrons. For example, if you look at the cross-section of hydrogen, it's about 20.4 barns. So that's how mass is being defined in this new unit of measure regimen. Now, I've also made some major discoveries on the nuclear structure. I propose that it's a static nucleus that has a face-armored cubic nuclear lattice. I produced a new periodic table of nuclear shapes, and for that, not only do I show the kind of silhouettes, like zirconium has a silhouette of a cube with 4 little pyramids shown there of the 6 pyramids. And it doesn't show the charge distribution in these silhouettes on this new periodic table of the elements. So there are rules. I've published already, and I published a paper, let's see, on the internet. My blog is listed there, and there's about 5 blogs that are linked in that one, and YouTube videos and things. Now, I'm trying to show a wide variety of different things to look at. So let's look at some of my models of nuclei here. See, I'll move the camera over here. Oh. No, maybe that's a bad idea, moving the camera. I'll bring the model over here. So, oh yeah, I can blank the screen, and I'll put the model up in front here. So this is iron. In the future, in 200 years from now, you will see that this is the standard old-fashioned science. Today it's revolutionary that iron is ferromagnetic because it has 2 coaxial rings of protons. And it's all built on a cube. I'm showing you the cube here. You can see it's kind of a little square with 4 white things for protons and a bunch of brown balls for the neutrons, and that all the elements can be extrapolated using inductive logic and geometric reasoning to figure that this is in fact the correct structure of the iron nucleus. There's another model here I'll show you. Now this one is iron also, green protons and white neutrons. Now the difference is really that this has both rings completed. So as I turn it around, see there's a complete proton ring on one side that's coaxial with the other side's ring. And it's like a little coaxial connector or a transformer, or it's a magnetically good shape. It is propitious for ferromagnetism to be a plausible result of these protons stacking up. Now this is 57 protons and neutrons here, 26 green ones and 31 white neutrons here. So all these models exactly use the integers that are known from the standard science. So let's go back to the overview again. So we'll see that I'll be talking about the momentum of free space in 8 dimensions. So we have the usual 4 dimensions for gravity, and I'm using 4 dimensions to account for electromagnetism. And it's an accounting thing. Physicists are really accountants with a higher range of variables. So that the 8 dimensions are quite understandable to accountants, surveyors, geometers. And in fact, all science is much simpler than you were told in the past. And one thing is that gravity, G, and electromagnetism, EM, is related through the proton and through the 8 dimensions. That the conservation of power, I propose, is possibly a new law of the power of gravity pulling down on every other piece of matter in the universe, is the same amount of power that a proton can provide interacting with its paired electron. For example, it can only give out 1 photon every so often, just based on gravity building up the relaxation and stimulation of the atom. Now, I haven't proved that yet, so this is information that is not approved by educators. What I'm doing today for this first 20-minute session is that I'm going to just go through this overview and give you theoretical physics that is proposed but not approved by educators. All right, and it is based on the mirror in the proton, as I'm pointing at there. Quarks are not in the proton. In the proton is mirror at the very center. I call it negative infinity. And that takes all the 4 dimensions of gravity and reflects it outwards as the 4 dimensions of electromagnetism. And that accounts for atoms also, and many other things. Antimatter is redefined for it is just matter that reverses some of those 8 dimensions. So the flow goes backwards. It's not a new particle. In fact, people talk about too many particles, and I'm trying to cut down on that as I'm providing leadership for the theoretical physicists of our civilization. I'm providing the non-crossing law for electron-proton pairs, and that's like Lenz's law. And it accounts for a spin and the quantization of spin and many things. The Pauli exclusion principle is related to this. And therefore, I've been able to define the North Pole and the South Pole geometrically. I've redefined ferromagnetism, and I found that it's interesting to do more research on the rule of how fast a motor can spin. For example, if the electron's only going 1 millimeters per second, and the motor is spinning at 1,000 millimeters per second, then I believe there's a limit. As if you keep the electron speed and the DC motor going constant at 1 millimeter per second, there's a limit to how fast it can spin, not set by friction, but set by this rule of the electron-proton pairing. And I've made up new force formulas to replace Newton's gravitational constant and Coulomb constant, K. And it's all about the radius, R. I replaced all those constant, G and K, but in functions of R, the radius of the proton. Okay, now also cosmology with eternity. It includes dark matter and dark energy, which is dark matter is matter with no electrons. Dark energy is all those electrons lurking out there on the fringes of the universe. So now that's the end of the summary for today. I still have 6 minutes left for today going live. And I'm going to just give one directive. I want all you physicists out there to understand I am working to make quarks obsoleted for educators. A great burden will be lifted from a lot of students there. All right, so my name's Alan Folmsbee. I have appointed myself to be a theoretical physicist. I have a Master of Science degree in electrical engineering. And now I'm going to turn the camera back towards my garden in the backyard. Okay, I'm back to the extremely wide angle. All right, it's only like 4 minutes left here for my mandatory 20-minute minimum. But I'm just like extremely excited to have this huge opportunity on YouTube for free live streaming. This is an outrage. How does Alphabet or Google or YouTube make money on this type of science? I mean, how many people were going to be in Europe and England at 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. in Moscow or something? That's prime time for you. I would think you'd be on your smartphones. No, I'm thankful for you being on your smartphones watching this YouTube broadcast. Let's see, I have some more show and tell to do in this introductory thing. So just let me give you a start at the beginning of how I got the idea for these things. Like I was saying earlier, time was my interest at first. I claimed that time doesn't exist. And I found out from a wiser physicist that time does exist. And Joy Christian says that it's growing. Time is growing. So I figured that actually space must be shrinking, and that if you take the volume of a proton and you make that absorb the surrounding space every 5 nanoseconds, then that does account for the acceleration due to gravity, as follows. Space is treated as a liquid. Protons consume the liquid and emit time at the speed of light. So in fact, light travels at the speed of time. And that the acceleration then happens for a mass is affected by this flow of the liquid in one direction. So relative to that any mass above the Earth, the liquid is just flowing by at a constant velocity. But light, that time is going by the other way, and that takes the velocity to a higher derivative of time, causing acceleration. And things that go into the Earth multiply in physics, in the formulas, and things that come out of objects divide. So that's why time is in the denominator and space would be in the numerator. Now, under a mass equals area theory, the momentum of free space can be described for this gravity volume theory. And in that way, we get the constant for each proton and neutron, 7 times 10 to the minus 37th cubic meters per second. That is the momentum of free space for each baryon in the universe, and it accounts for all gravity. And I claim for all relativistic effects, when you consider that time is growing at the speed c, and that observations are made with equipment made from atoms, and that they're normally making observations of other atoms in the distance. And important to all this is that the pairing of a proton-electron is a local effect, and gravity is a long-range effect. So that it's time now for me to say goodbye. I'm going to be back on Wednesday, same time, 2000 hours, Greenwich Mean Time, and that is 10 a.m. here in Hawaii, 12 noon in California. All right, then, see you Wednesday.